Well, a very good morning and welcome to Citizen Extra on this 16th day of October 2017. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. The word dialogue, it's become quite commonplace nowadays, especially when talking about Kenya's current political dispensation. More parties, including church leaders, a group of former legislators and even the civil societies have joined NASA leader Raila Odinga in calling for President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Jubilee Party to agree to discussions on how to move the country forward. But Jubilee are categorical that there is no need or time for dialogue. We talk a bit about that in the course of this broadcast. Meanwhile, we have now reached the 10-day countdown to the October 26th poll, but still there are more questions than answers about what will happen next week, Thursday. Will the IEBC be able to conduct a poll in all 290 constituencies? Will the transmission be legal? Bearing in mind the IEBC has stated that OT Morpho will not have enough time to add the names of the other 5 candidates into the results transmission system, and thus text transmission of results may not be possible. Could someone rush to court immediately after the polls and raise concerns over how it was conducted, threatening its legality? Those are some of the other big issues that we'll be discussing in the course of this program. And finally, the National Super Alliance has announced daily demonstrations starting today up until Friday in the push for IEBC reforms. This as police increasingly come under fire for the manner in which they are reining in on protesters and defending themselves. We host a representative from the police service and other key stakeholders as well later on in this broadcast, and we will also be monitoring the situation around the country. We value your feedback. Talk to us in regards to some of the discussions we're going to be having on this show. Our SMS line is 22422. You can also catch us on social media. The hashtag is Citizen Extra. Today we are asking you, the repeat polls are set for next week, Thursday. Do you have any concerns about the October 26th poll? Do you have any concerns about the October 26th poll? Talk to us, 22422, as I mentioned once again, and on social media, and I will sample your feedback even as we continue with this broadcast. I have several guests in studio whom I will be introducing to you shortly, but before that, we are monitoring the situation across the country even as we anticipate more anti-IEBC demos in certain parts of the country today. We are live in Kisumu County, and those images should be coming on your screen now, and in Mombasa as well. In Kisumu, what we know is that bonfires have been lit at main bus stage near Kondele and the mega city. This is Jomo Kenyatta Highway. We know some bonfires have been lit, but we are told by our team on the ground there that protesters have not gathered as such or in large numbers. A few people here and there, but a few bonfires have been lit. While in Mombasa, we know that we are live from Pembe Zandobo, which is where protesters usually converge, but we know that police have also are also in large numbers around Uhuru Gardens in Mombasa, where some sort of activity is supposed to take place today. Those are some of the images that you are seeing now on your screen, and we'll go back there to talk to each of our correspondents to get updates on what exactly is happening. And once again, keep talking to us. You're watching Citizen Extra. Let me introduce my guest in studio. I'll start with from the far right, Honorable Otiende Amolo, Member of Parliament Rarieda. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Daisy Amdani, political analyst. Welcome to the program as well. Irungu Houghton or Irungu Horton? You will correct me where I may have.
Second time correct.
Second time correct. Irungu Horton. Okay, a civil rights activist, political analyst as well. Welcome to the program. Honorable Raphael Tuju, Secretary General, Jubilee Party. Welcome to the program as well.
Thank you.
Honorable Amola, I'll start with you. Yesterday, a big rally in Mombasa. Senator James Orengo stated that if they, IEBC, I believe he was referring to, hold elections next week, then NASA could potentially hold its own elections or boycott. What did he mean by that statement, or was it on a lighter note?
Thank you. There is nothing light about anything anybody says in these times. It is clear to me, and it is clear to all who care about this country, that there cannot be election on 26th. But if the IEBC and Jubilee proceed, it will be a circus. It is an invitation to a circus, and some of us are not willing to join that circus. And therefore, if anybody thinks that you can have elections as contemplated under the Constitution, that cannot happen. First, for legal reasons, for practical reasons, and for logistical reasons.
It's interesting that you brought up legal reasons. Raila's withdrawal was before the High Court judgment by Justice John Mativo. Now that IEBC has decided to rely on that judgment, even as they push forward and add names, etc., Ekuru Court and the like, has your legal team had to go back and relook at the decision that was made last week, Tuesday, and rethink that again? Is there a worry that what certain international papers are calling a gamble could actually be that?
There is nothing to look back at, and there's no gamble there. The law is very clear. The law since 2013, whether it was good law or bad law, was always that if there were two candidates and one withdrew, then automatically it triggers a 90-day preparation period. By the time Raila Amolo Odinga withdrew his candidacy, that was the law. Any subsequent decision, whether by a court, whether by amendment of parliament, cannot apply retroactively. And that means the only lawful process that IBC must take is to apply the 90-day period from the date of that withdrawal. Any decision by Mativo, any decision by the court,
Tuesday,
that can only be futuristic.
Okay.
It cannot be retroactive.
Okay, I'll allow each of my guests to have a quick comment before we listen to what some of our leaders had to say over the weekend. Daisy, I can allow you to react or respond.
Well, you know, for me, I really think that we've come to a point in Kenya where we need leadership, not political brinkmanship. And what we're seeing right now, from both sides, is actually political brinkmanship, where we have people talking at each other and citing this law and that law, lawyers, senior counsel, all of them giving us confusing interpretations. And I think that IBC have a responsibility as the institution that is constitutionally mandated to carry out elections in this country to seek an interpretation from the court. Because the
why do you think they haven't done so? This has
I think, you see, right now we just have an interpretation that we have been given by Honorable Otiende Amolo, who is himself a lawyer and a very good lawyer. And we have contradicting advice coming from other lawyers, okay, who are equally experienced. Therefore, IBC needs to be very clear, because this has caused, there's a lot of confusion right now in the country in terms of what are the interpretations, because remember that both sides have their followers, their supporters, okay, and all of them are listening to their respective political coalitions or political parties, and both of them are giving conflicting information, and this is creating a situation of anxiety across the country. When NASA says that there shall be no elections, remember that they have constituencies and counties where they have critical support. We already saw an attack on one of the presiding officers who had gone for training, an attack on their homestead. You know, those are the kind of scenes that we don't want to witness.
Okay.
And so we cannot ignore that we are in a situation where we need people to temper themselves, and we need the law to be very clear. Okay. So IBC, I think the best thing would be to actually go to court, because the courts are constitutionally mandated to definitively interpret the Constitution. Okay. And until the court says this is the law, it's anybody's guess what the law is. But at this point in time, we really need sober minds to prevail. Okay. We need hardline stance to be dropped, because at the end of the day, we're pushing the country to a place where we might all end up regretting.
Okay.
I think before I start, I think I'd like to just pause for a minute and just acknowledge the 200 or so people that died in Mogadishu over the last few hours. And I think for me what that was a wake-up call in terms of the power of intolerance and extremism if it is left unchecked. And if there is no statesmanship. I was corrected yesterday, there's nothing like statespersonship, statesmanship that emerges. I mean, you know, if our leaders don't think that, somehow think that Kenya is infallible, or that they are now beyond making human miscalculations that could lead to thousands of people dying, we just need to look at a place like Syria. Less than 7 years ago, Syria had a police force, it had an army, it had a functional judiciary, and within 7 years we've gone from essentially what was a handful of protests by young protesters who got killed through extrajudicial killings, very much like we see on our streets in Kenya today. That led to further demonstrations. Within a few months there were hundreds of thousands of protesters on the streets, and before that we have 500,000 Syrians dead and 11 million in exile. This is not something that we should take very lightly, and I take Amolo's point, which is essentially that if we don't see the leadership emerging soon, there is a point at which they will not be able to control the dynamics which they find emerging around them. And I think one way is for NASA or interested parties to basically, or the IBC to go to the Supreme Court and seek an advisor on this issue. And the IBC is best placed to do this because they're a government agency, they could seek that. But I also think there's time for Raila and Uhuru basically to show leadership at their most individual level and have these talks that we need. We need inclusive dialogue. The churches have said it, civil society is now saying it. Yesterday we had leadership emerge from within politicians who are supportive of the president, and I wouldn't be surprised that in the next few days we would see a similar form of leadership from those within NASA to call for leadership as well.
Okay. Honorable Tuju, I know you want to respond to what the other three panelists have said, but I have a quick question for you. In the last couple of interviews that you've given, whether at our station or other stations as well, you seem to say that there is a deliberate push for dialogue. Yes, it may be coming from many voices, but it is a feeling that it is the opposition primarily behind this push. Do you feel that Jubilee is being pushed to a corner with the call for dialogue? Is that a bit about what you are alluding to, especially yesterday when we caught part of your interview?
As well, I think
is dialogue is it a conspiracy?
Well, many Kenyans like to wallow in dishonesty, and we are where we are because the Supreme Court ordered, in compliance with the Constitution, that the elections have to be held within 60 days. That was not an order from the Jubilee government. Let's face it. That was not an order from the Jubilee government. It was an order from the Supreme Court. What does Jubilee government have to do with it? Quite honestly.
It's one of the key players.
Yes, one of the key players. Yeah. But we're supposed to comply. Or are we not supposed to comply with the order from the Supreme Court?
Now,
that all of a sudden, because one of the parties is not happy, and they're not able to canvass what they're not happy about through the courts, which they had gone to in the first place, therefore, let us suspend the Constitution and have a dialogue. Now, that is a trick.
So which was my question to you?
Precisely. It is a trick in the sense that they know they lost the elections in February this year, and I can tell you that without any risk of contradiction, and I've said this before. The 8th of August was simply a confirmation of the win we had in February this year. And the four Prime Minister himself said, and I can quote, that the winner of the elections will be known after the mass voter registration in February. And he appealed to his constituents to register in large numbers. When they saw the trend, because the good thing is that the IBC used to advertise this on a weekly basis to show the progress. By the time the registration of voters was over, they went to court and asked for more time. And more time was given for further registration. But unfortunately, because of the time factor, they only got 4 days. That was not enough to bridge the gap that we already made. So the truth of the matter is that as long as we're relying on that, let me finish. As long as we're relying on that register, the current register of voters as they're registered, whether we vote on 26th, repeat it after another 90 days, or after another 100 days, or another 200 days, the result will be the same.
Meaning that you're assuming that people in strongholds only vote for the side in which they're associated with? Is that what you're trying to say? That NASA would look at, for example, Central and say all these are President Uhuru Kenyatta's voters without, I mean, isn't that assumption to make? Let's be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest.
Yes.
Raila does not have many voters in Nyeri, neither does Uhuru have many voters.
Although we have seen the numbers changing.
But I think
give or take.
Okay. I think the bigger point is
briefly,
if we want to be dishonest, let us refute what I've just said.
That's a slightly loaded question. I don't know if you asked those questions because you give us the opportunity to
briefly, because then it's bringing Honorable Amolo.
No, I think and with due respect to all the players, I think what's happened is that we have lost political imagination. That we have now locked ourselves into these binaries that do not allow us to be able to think outside of either you're with us or against us. Independent thinking is actually at the forefront of our Constitution. It allows me to be able to say I am not aligned to Jubilee nor NASA, but I will align to them based on their positions and their values, and that my position may shift. Now, to start off by saying that all Central Province people have to be Kikuyu and all Nyanza folks have to be NASA, I think is completely a figment of the political class.
Okay. I'll come back to you for that. Before I give you a chance, Honorable Amolo, to speak, let's listen to what our leaders had to say this weekend with a lot of the political developments happening. Let's just listen in briefly.
Hata uzunguke nchi ngapi, hata uende pahali popote unataka kwenda, kwa sababu hiyo ni haki yako, utakumbuka kitu kimoja: Kenya haitawaliwi kutoka London ama Washington. Kenya inatawalwa kutoka hapa nchi yetu.
Kwa kweli nilikusaidia nusu mkate ya 2008 kwa sababu ulienda ukaharibu maneno, na kwa sababu Kenya imekataa sasa mambo ya nusu mkate, hata uende kwa wazungu mara ngapi, uende London, unaweza kwenda Washington, unaweza kwenda Paris, hata Berlin, lakini mambo ya nusu mkate, my friend, hakuna tena.
Raila Odinga naanza kumkaragosi ya Uhuru Kenyatta. Adio, Raila ameenda kule kupayuka kuambia wale watu ati anataka nusu mkate. Nataka nusu mkate. Nataka nusu mkate kweli? Sisi ni wenye buffalo. Sisi ni wenye buffalo.
To inspire a united and peaceful Kenya for all, we call upon the Jubilee government and the NASA coalition to dialogue with the aim of reaching agreement on a level playing field for the conduct of the successful presidential election. All efforts must be made to moderate, to calm, and to inspire confidence and peace in the Republic of Kenya.
We've also talked of more inclusive talks, so we are not leaving it just to them. This is bigger than any one individual.
But we are saying the mood of the country is not really good, so at least the main candidates need to engage. They can even engage tomorrow and we continue with the election on 26th.
If they don't, then it means the country will stay polarized as it is now. And it is not good for Kenya as a nation.
Yes.
So we are saying, speak to each other, let us compete like brothers, knowing that there shall only be one winner.
And we're expecting that last speaker, former Kiambu Governor, Honorable William Kabogo, to join us in the later part of this program. Honorable Mola, I can give you a chance to speak, but I have a quick question for you, even before you respond to what all our speakers have had to say. Has NASA considered the option of going to the Supreme Court either before the polls to seek interpretation on their current move and the legality of it, that's one, or to participate in the election and then go to the Supreme Court after that to raise further issues should they emerge on the 26th of October?
The answer to both questions is no.
And it will not happen?
Because there is no reason to. First of all, as I indicated, and it is something that is clearly demonstrable in law, the position of the law is clear. If IEBC chooses not to respect that position and have it adopt its own interpretation, which in itself is impracticable, so on their own standards, and we can set that differently, there is no reason for NASA to go to court. It would be IEBC to go to court if it thought it was unclear. But since they've chosen to take an interpretation that is clearly not lawful, are sticking to it and are not taking the option of going to the Supreme Court. Instead, they've gone to the Supreme Court on a very pedestal, it's just an unbelievable issue that they are asking the Supreme Court to interpret the judgment on the role of the chair on a matter that is so clear. If IBC was serious, then they would take this
issue to court. The role of the chair's matter is very clear. How he'll edit, whether he can edit.
It is very clear.
What's your legal
there's nothing to clarify there. The
word clear, I must say.
The position is this.
Yes, just briefly indulge us on that.
The position stated that the results as announced at the polling station are final. That KI decision was adopted by the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court further said that as the chair, what you cannot do is do what Chebukati did. That you go to Bomas, you purport to read the results from counties. and then you say those are the results. What the Supreme Court said as the chair, while you are not authorized to alter, but you must satisfy yourself that what has been brought to you is what was announced at the polling station. That is quite clear. There is no contradiction. Why would IBC waste taxpayers' money to go for an interpretation on that issue instead of going on the very critical issue that now, in view of the earlier decision of 2013 and in view of the material decision, what then should we do? That's what they will do. But they will not do that because they are in bed with Jubilee in having a circus on 26th. There is no question of NASA participating in the elections and then going to court after. Any Kenyan is allowed to go to court. And I can tell you this. If we have that circus on 26th, we will just have blown another 14 billion down the drain because it will be nullified. Why? First of all, leave NASA out of the picture. Ask yourself this very critical question. You are IBC. You have gazetted 2 names as the candidates. The court subsequently tells you no, you should not have done 2 names. You must add a 3rd name. Then what do? Instead of issuing a fresh gazette notice with those names now, you say those 2 names were already gazetted. So in addition, we are gazetting another 5. 2 mistakes already. One, the court did not order all of them to be included. The court order was clear. It was only in respect of the Court. So what is the basis of including all the others? Number 2,
to avoid future litigation.
Number 2, if that earlier gazette notice was invalid, then how can you say in addition to it? You do not add to an invalidity. Thirdly, the law requires that a gazette notice in respect of a presidential election must take 21 days. How do you explain that? Then you add to that and now you say that although the law requires that there must be transmission which is accurate, there must be a public portal that displays the results, there must be prescribed forms, then you say now as IBC first, we don't have time to include all the names of the 7 candidates in the KEMS kit. You cannot have differential standards for presidential candidates.
Which takes me back to my question. Rather than waiting for Kenya to get to October 26th and go through that whole process again, why not just go to court? You clearly have some points in hand which you could easily take to court and
the need for fair, credible and lawful elections is not NASA's. It is for all of us. Why should it be that every time it must be NASA? We have stated it. And so, if Jubilee and the IBC want to take us to that circus, let them play in that circus. But that circus will be declared unlawful. When Honorable Tuju says that the court ordered that we must have elections within 60 days, the important thing was not just the 60 days. The court said in strict compliance with the Constitution and the law. On the face of it, there is no compliance with the Constitution or the law on the face of it.
Okay.
So if we go on this, we're just wasting time.
Daisy.
I want to agree on several points with Otiende Amolo, and that is why I think that the best way forward is to go to court.
By
we need IBC needs to clear the air around it, okay? Because remember, they're the only ones mandated to carry out an election, okay, in Kenya. The issues that have been raised by Mheshimiwa here are genuine and they are valid. And this election is not just about Jubilee and NASA. This election is about Kenyans, and it's about being able to express our will and be able to move forward, to have a validly elected president so that we are able to move this country forward. I don't see why it is so difficult for soberness to prevail, for dialogue to be had. And the dialogue, you see, unfortunately, dialogue in Kenya, at least the last dialogue we had, resulted in a Nusu Mkate government. So it is now being interpreted that dialogue to resolve issues
will inevitably
lead to that, because that is where it led to. But I think both protagonists are very clear. They are not interested in Nusu Mkate government. But we have citizens, because even those leaders who have spoken are speaking on behalf of citizens. We have the church leadership that has spoken. Irungu wrote an interesting piece yesterday calling on those leaders. I have seen Bishop Oginde has also written. These are Kenyans, okay? This is our country. We have a stake in this country. This business of political bickering and political posturing, with people feeling that they have certain entitlements to power and how it is exercised, and how they are going to drive this nation either to the brink of an absolute crisis, where at the end of the day we unravel the entire nation, is unacceptable. And so I don't think it will be fatal for us to not have elections on the 26th. It will not be fatal, okay? Remember also, because I know there is concerns, I mean, I've seen there are other people who have gone seeking to have the caretaker government, and everybody, there are so many activities that are happening on the political scene, but the Constitution does not envision a vacancy in the office of the president, and so Uhuru Kenyatta remains in that office until we have a validly elected president, or until his mandate is renewed. Therefore,
although not everyone agrees.
Well, you see, that's the other thing. It's not clear. It's clear until it's not clear. So that is why we need. Yes, all of them say it is clear, and they give you complete, different interpretation. So what we need is, you see, the law becomes clear when the court says this is the law. Okay. Therefore, we need the courts. And the courts cannot just move themselves. So we need people to move to court. Okay. But there's nothing that stops our political leaders. We still have 10 days, 9 days. Is it 9 days or 10 days?
10 days. Been between 9 and 10 days.
Yes, before we get to the 26th. One thing that is clear, and one thing that we refuse to talk about, is the need for that dialogue. The calls for dialogue didn't start yesterday. As early as 2014, there was a call for national dialogue. And I remember that President Uhuru Kenyatta was actually amenable to the whole idea until suddenly he wasn't, And so we've been postponing dialogue for a long time. Now, there are two things that could happen. We could either go headlong into the elections 26th and cause a crisis, because I think there's the feeling that let's do the 26th and talk about whatever needs to be talked about later. And there is the opinion that we need to resolve issues. I see an ugly situation,
if we have the polls on the 26th.
If we do not resolve the issue.
Okay.
So we can't see a problem. We can't see a problem and run headlong into it.
Okay. We don't go come in. I want to reference your article yesterday. You gave the example of a Turkish ruler who told his followers that you can give me the exact details. Who told his rulers, don't listen to my proclamations in anger. I can't be held responsible for them. Just explain to us what that context was. I know Honorable Tuju hasn't had a chance to read it yet.
He will enjoy it. I'm sure he likes parables and proverbs. So one of the things that it's an interesting story in history. So it's a story of a Turkish leader. He's a modernizer, and he realized that in the evenings he would have a lot of fun with his friends. There would be a lot of let's not, because I think it's a family show, where they'll be doing lots of interesting things in the evenings, and he realized that actually he made some very bad pronouncements when he was slightly, I guess when he was having too much fun. So he made a proclamation that says, if I make any instruction at the time that I am enjoying with my court, please ignore it. It is struck down. You are actually instructed not to pay attention to this. And I referenced it to our leaders, because I think at this point, when there is so much anger and there's so much vitriol in the space, and we saw it in the rallies, and what amazes me, at some point, I actually, when I was thinking about writing the article, I thought maybe I should find both of their telephone numbers, and I should put them in the Sunday Standard, and I should say, if you don't have each other's numbers, these are each other's numbers, call each other. I didn't find the numbers fast enough, otherwise I would have done it. Maybe Tuju can give me both numbers, or actually maybe the two of them can give me the two numbers.
Well, I have both.
You have both, right? That's what you mean. The point of this really is that leadership at a time like this is really keeping a sober mind.
Okay.
Now, in the back of the two political parties, there are two very deep fears, and they won't say this here. The first is that they will have to concede defeat. Neither party at this moment is able to countenance the idea that they may have to concede defeat in this 26th election or another election. They're not preparing for defeat. There's no 100-day program post-loss. The second fear they have is that they do not have the mandate of the entire country. Neither NASA nor Jubilee can claim at this point that if the 26th goes ahead, that this country will remain cohesive and that it will not be polarized to a point that even we are not able to run elections on the 26th in certain parts of the country. These are the two greatest fears they have, and I share them also.
Okay. Before I give you a chance, Honorable Tuju, to speak, we are live in Nyeri, where President Uhuru Kenyatta has official aeroplane is about to take off, headed to Garissa for a series of campaigns today, even as we count down 10 days and counting to the October 26th poll. Of course, we know that Jubilee have been in that part of the country since Friday, I believe, or Saturday rather, while on NASA side, we know that there was a big rally in Mombasa yesterday, and we know that NASA headed to Meru, I believe, tomorrow. So that's a little bit about what you can expect from both sides of the political divide over the next couple of days. Of course, different messages for Jubilee, telling their supporters the polls will take place, go and vote, you know, marshalling their numbers. But for the National Super Alliance, it's a different message altogether. They are saying that there will be no elections, and that the anti-IEBC reforms, or anti-IEBC rallies rather, must take place until reforms are seen at the IEBC, and that is when they will give further instructions. So definitely both sides very busy out there talking to their supporters, but with different messages. And that is the situation that we find ourselves in as a country. So we continue monitoring the situation here at the Nyeri airstrip, and when the president and his team get there, then we'll take you back and just capture some of those live images. Honorable Tuju, I can give you a chance now just to respond briefly to what each of the panelists have had.
I really don't have much to respond. I think maybe I just want to ask each of them a question. Sorry, I'm becoming the interviewer now.
If you haven't said that you don't have much response.
No.
Briefly.
Yes.
You've told me you don't have much.
No.
I can help you out. He's given you two fears that he says both sides of the political divide are facing. The first one is that they fear that they may not have the mandate or the numbers to keep the country cohesive, to get maximum support. And that's why also you can see on Jubilee side, as much as they're insisting that elections must take place, they're also aware that the elections need to have some form of
correction.
Or legitimacy.
No, correction.
Those are his feelings.
Correction right away.
Go ahead.
Correction right away from what you say. Jubilee is not insisting that we must have elections on the 26th. I want to ask you, does this president or Jubilee have the powers to change the Supreme Court ruling that elections be held in 60 days?
No.
If we do, please tell me.
No,
if the president has the powers,
I'll respond to that.
If the president has the powers to say that we don't have elections within the 60 days, please, I need to be educated on that. If Jubilee has the powers to say that there will be no elections, I mean, NASA definitely has the powers, but if we do have powers as the president of this country, President Uhuru, or as Jubilee, that we actually do have somewhere in the Constitution the powers that we can state that there's not going to be elections despite the ruling of the Supreme Court and despite that provision in the Constitution. Please, I need to be advised.
They may not have the powers in that sense of it, but legal teams can sit down and work solutions.
I think this is
without breaching the Constitution.
Progress. What I'm hearing the Secretary General
I think I need to be educated.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll help him a bit. I'm not sure if I can educate him, but I can offer him an analysis.
Yes.
What I hear is progress. I'm hearing Jubilee saying that they are not adamant that the elections must take place on the 26th, and that if there was a dialogue that helped the situation navigate, the country navigate through these difficult moments, that they would be open to that dialogue. If he said that, I would be very happy.
I didn't say that.
I maybe put your words in his mouth.
Let me clarify. I need you very clever people on this table to educate me that this president or Jubilee have the powers to disobey the Constitution and disobey the court ruling that there has to be an election, a fresh election within 60 days.
Honorable, come in.
The answer is yes, Honorable Tuju, through your surrogates in the IBC. The IBC has the power to interpret the law as clearly as it should be, which is from the moment one of the two candidates they had gazetted pulled out, then by operation of law they have 90 days. That is all they need to do. And all that Jubilee needs to do is join NASA in telling IBC, first, interpret the law correctly. Secondly, your confusion and inability caused the country to have a fresh elections. You are continuing with that, and it will cause us to have a third election. But instead, Jubilee is cheering them on. Instead, Jubilee is cheering them on. And all that, when we say we need talks, And I join everybody who's saying we need to talk, because this country is for all of us. But if you take the view that this country need not be for all of us, as long as it's for some of us, then where are you taking the country? And that's the view Jubilee is taking. I will tell you what. The idea of talks did not start now. It did not start this year. It started much earlier. And you will remember that the Right Honorable Prime Minister always called for talks. But every time he called for talks, he was rubbished. We called for talks before the elections of 8th. Right from about March of this year. And NASA insisted that we need to talk about how to have credible elections. Jubilee told the Prime Minister that if you are not prepared for elections, then you can abandon the race. We are prepared. What happened? We ended up in a shambolic election because Jubilee did not want to talk. After the elections was cancelled, NASA said that we need to talk about how to have credible elections, because the elections were not just cancelled. There were reasons why they were cancelled. That is what NASA was calling, and is still calling, irreducible minimum. The irreducible minimum is the observations of the Supreme Court why the elections were invalidated. All those things are still outstanding.
Jubilee will also say that their team sat down, came up with proposals. Parliament also took a stance in
indeed, that is. Let me explain that. The irony is this: when we called for talks, it was dismissed before elections. When we called for discussions on how to have IBC conduct proper elections, the Jubilee team, Honorable Tuju among them, said, "For us, we have no demands on IBC. Let IBC do whatever it wants." Now, it is doing whatever it wants in contradiction of the Supreme Court ruling. When then the IBC called for the candidates to come, and there have been at least 3 meetings set, the Right Honourable Prime Minister has in person attended. The Jubilee candidate has never attended. When we call for talks, it is not for Nusumkati. It is how to have credible elections. If we have fair and credible elections, I can tell you that Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga is prepared to concede if they are proper, credible elections.
Okay, allow me to cut you off there because we need to cross over to Nyeri County. Do we now have that link? Our report on the ground, Martin Munene, is live with Kieni Member of Parliament Kanini Kega, just to weigh in on the debate that we are having in studio. Martin, if you can hear me, go ahead and give us that interview.
Like you said, I am at the Nyeri airstrip in Nyeri County, and with me is Kieni Member of Parliament and other members of Parliament who are here to see off President Uhuru Kenyatta, who is expected to continue with his campaign rallies later today in Garissa and also in Kitui counties. And kindly, Mheshimiwa, if you can join me here, and we would like you to help us understand, number one, what is your take on the calls by a section of Mount Kenya leaders, like they're saying that President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga should sit and have a dialogue. What is your take on that?
The power belongs to the people and can only be exercised directly by the people or their democratically elected leaders. And when you say that Mount Kenya leaders are asking for dialogue, I don't understand which leaders you are talking about. If you are talking about the former member of Parliament for Mukurweini, the former MP for Teto, and the former governor of Kiambu, I don't think they speak on behalf of Mount Kenya leaders. They were in the ballot and they were actually defeated. So that's not the stand of our people. Our people are very, very clear that they will speak. The only dialogue that we are entertaining will be done on the 26th of this month, whereby Kenyans will go and vote their president. So whoever is calling for dialogue actually is missing the point, because dialogue can only be done through the Constitution, and the Constitution is very, very clear that any leader, including an MCA, is elected directly by the people. So I don't think Kabado, Nol, Kabogo or Mother Karua are talking on behalf of the people of Mount Kenya. They are not talking on behalf of the people of Mount Kenya.
And maybe, Mheshimiwa, on the same issue, are we going to have an election come 26th, or what is going to be going on? Are you ready for it?
Absolutely, we are ready. Going around, we were with the president yesterday in Nyahururu, in Nyeri. Today we are going to Garissa, we are going to Kitui, we are going to Machakos. We are on the campaign trail. We have been having teams. We have about 15
Well, that seems to have gotten cut off midway. Hopefully we can pick that up a bit later on. But of course, leaders there stating that they disagree with a section of former legislators who yesterday called for dialogue. They're calling themselves a caucus of leaders who feel that where at the point at which this nation is currently at, dialogue is one of the ways in which the country can move forward. And they specifically stated that President Uhuru Kenyatta and NASA leader Raila Odinga need to find a way to work together. Do we have that link once again? Let's go back there briefly.
Change it up to the 30th of this month, because it is express provision in the constitution. There will be elections come 26th, unless IEBC maybe says otherwise, but nobody else. Nobody. I saw yesterday the governor for Migoli trying to say that in his county there will be no election, and you ask yourself, how is he going to stop an election from happening? We have an institution called IBC, and the IBC have said clearly and categorically that they are ready for the next general election. For us, Parliament, ours is to appropriate funds. We came up with a budget of 20 billion shillings, which was actually assented by the president. So for us, we are ready. IBC is ready. If anybody else is not ready, I don't think that is enough reason for anybody to say that there will be no election. There will be election on the 26th.
All right, Mheshimiwa, kindly let me call your counterpart here to just also give us a perspective. Mheshimiwa, karibu hayo. Kindly look at the camera and help us. What is your take on the calls for dialogue between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga?
I think the only dialogue that we're going to be having in this country is on the 26th. I think the dialogue that needs to be held in this country is within the Kenyan population. They're the ones who have to decide for themselves, among themselves, who they actually want to lead. This thing of doing boardroom decisions, boardroom conversations is what has gotten us to this point. We have had history in this country of doing boardroom discussions from the 80s to the 90s. We passed a constitution in 2010 to stop us from ever going back to the point where 2 people or 5 people or 10 people go into a boardroom and decide that from now on the people who will lead this country is so and so and so and so, na tumekubaliana hapa, and then you go and now imagine that the rest of the country will agree. Our dialogue, as far as we are concerned as Jubilee, the dialogue this country is going to have, we will have dialogue as a country, but it's going to be in
We apologize for that. Very unfortunate. Let's carry on with our discussion in studio. I don't know what is happening there with our signal. Daisy, I think it was your chance just to give us your feedback. Let's talk about the material day next week, Thursday, October 26th. And there was a report in yesterday's dailies, and of course this is in relation to a press conference Roslyn Akombe also held, where there were concerns that returning officers from certain areas of the country are worried, are not willing to sign up to participate in the polls. Is it possible that this is something that IEBC should seriously look at, and what are the potential implications of a narrative like that, even to voters who may want to go to the polls but are afraid that anything could happen?
This is why we need to have dialogue, because the people in those areas are adamant. They are following their leaders from that area to say that they will not have elections, and of course they're intimidating the electoral officials. So, you know, for me, that's what I keep saying. Why do we want to rush headlong into a problem? Because the issues that are to be dialogued are not for the purposes of agreeing on a Nusumukate government or a coalition government. They're for the purposes of being able to iron out the issues that are outstanding. And I think IEBC actually tried to bring the protagonists together, and we still had the same grandstanding. I think I saw you, Honorable Tuju, at those meetings, and I think I also saw you, Honorable Otiende Amolo, at those meetings, and somehow they failed to agree. So I think IEBC have really tried to do it. As to this issue that Jubilee are insisting on, that the Constitution has said 60 days and they cannot violate the Constitution. Jubilee are in violation of the Constitution even as we speak, and have been since 2015, when the Supreme Court ordered that we need a law in place for the 2/3 gender principle. It's a fundamental principle of the electoral process in Article 81, and if we are to follow the law strictly as they insist that we cannot have dialogue because we must follow the Constitution strictly, then strictly speaking we shouldn't have a parliament. Parliament should be disbanded, because Parliament is in contravention of the Constitution, having failed to put in place the necessary legislation to implement the two-thirds gender principle, which is a key principle of the Constitution. Therefore, we cannot just pick and choose at opportune times, which constitutional principles we are going to follow and which ones we're not. Because if we're following the rule of law, let's follow the rule of law. But at the end of the day, we must also remember that the law is made for us and not us for the law. Therefore, we cannot have a clear problem where we are rushing headlong into a situation that may end up bringing us more problems than it will solutions before we iron out these issues. And I said before, and I will say it again, I don't think it will be fatal if we do not have the elections on the 26th. I do think that IBC, as a responsible institution and the one mandated to carry out the elections, really should go to court, even right now, to the Supreme Court, seek an advisory on the implications of Honorable Raila Odinga's withdrawal. Seek an interpretation. Will it be fatal? Can the elections be deferred so that we iron out the issues? We've already got the issue of the KIMS kits. Now those KIMS kits, they've said cannot be configured. That is obviously a technical issue, right? Because I think we must also stop trying to read too much. There's also a lot of with suspicion. We read into some moves, and I think IBC has said because of some of the technical issues, they would not be able to configure them. But already that has raised people's suspicions, and people are saying, aha, so there's an algorithm that has been put in. So what is it? Why would it be so difficult for IBC to actually go and seek an interpretation?
If you will indulge me, I need to allow Honorable Tuju to respond to some of the statements that Daisy has made before they get lost in translation. You looked quite perturbed as she was talking.
No, it's okay.
I can give you a chance now just to briefly talk about the statements that she's raised, and of course for me looking at, is there any other way that Jubilee can sit down and look at this narrative separate from the current message that they are pushing, that whether you like it or not, elections must happen?
I once again, I did ask the question. Unfortunately, when my Member of Parliament, Otieno Molo, responded, he refused to respond. He only say that we have surrogates at IEBC. If I was to talk about who has surrogates at IEBC, then we would not end the day, because I know names in IEBC that I can actually link to you and your team. But let's sympathize with the people at IEBC. They have enough problems. Let's not start calling names. So it's an institution. But if you say we have surrogates, I want to tell you we don't have surrogates. But I do have some suspicions there as well. But we don't need to get into that. I asked a very simple question. Do we as Jubilee, or does this president have any authority or any powers to define the date of elections?
No.
He doesn't. Right? The moment the Supreme Court did announce that the elections have to be done within 60 days, that mandate moved to the IBC. And it had to be within 60 days. Whether it's on 26th, or on 17th, or on 1st of November, that's neither here or there, but that's what the Constitution says. Now, if we have to change the Constitution, I think all Kenyans know the process that we have to follow to change the Constitution. Of course, you can bring out the issue of gender, that, there was a declaration about it, and
it has been disobeyed.
Disobeyed
and
by,
it's still being disobeyed
by the Jubilee government. No, those are parliamentary issues. And it is not the Jubilee government which is disobeying it. I remember the matter went to Parliament, and unfortunately, in a bipartisan way, they were not able to come to a conclusion. So that's a parliamentary affair. But I don't want to get into that, because I do have my personal opinions on that, and I empathize with the agenda that you follow. If it was my way, it should have been done. But for us to have a situation in which every time they raise an electoral process, some players are able to precipitate a crisis to force us onto a table, so that then we dialogue, because they're on the streets, they are fighting, they are throwing stones, they are whatever. In fact, if they don't have tear gas, they demonstrate that there's no tear gas. Now, if you're going to allow a situation that each time we go to an electoral process, then we have to be blackmailed into a negotiating table by the loser, then I think there's no point having elections. Why don't we just have a meeting, have that dialogue that everybody is having, we agree on a rotational basis, and move on? I don't know. Now, you say that there's been an appeal for dialogue before. I had those appeals, and I've stayed a little bit in diplomacy for some time. Those were not appeals for dialogue. It was exactly the same approach. We're going to have dialogue or else. Now, anybody told that we're going to have a dialogue with you or else, that's the end of the dialogue.
Honorable, two quick questions for you before I allow each of my panelists to respond, and I'll give you Irungu and Honorable Molo a chance. Number one, it said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. In the case of Jubilee, NASA say, we've tried to talk to you for a long time. You keep ignoring us. If you had listened, maybe we wouldn't be here. How would you respond to that? That's one. And secondly, are you aware that there's a possibility that even after the October 26th poll, the Supreme Court could annul that election again on so many different issues, and we might be back here in this studio in December, in January, in February, having this same discussion again? And if that possibility has come up in your minds as Jubilee, is there a way to get out of that that doesn't involve changing laws which many in the country are still skeptical about, which is what we're seeing in Parliament? So two quick questions for you.
Two questions. Well, what was the first?
Insanity, doing the same thing over. Can Jubilee?
Yes. All right, fine.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's anybody who does things the same way and expecting different results, I think it is NASA. Quite honestly so. And I think it's really desperate what they are currently trying to do. They have said they'll have street demonstrations up to 26th on a daily basis, each day of the week. That's fine. Psychologically, we're ready for that because that's what you expect from NASA anyway. So we should be surprised, but we're quite ready for it. After 26, they are still invited to go to the street and demonstrate. That is their constitutional right. It is the Constitution, and you can do nothing about that. Now, your second question is that, is it possible that is it possible that the courts will nullify the next elections?
And we find ourselves back here again.
Not only is it possible, Justice Maraga says the same. He says that if he goes back and if there are the same mistakes, he'll still nullify it.
That doesn't worry you as Jubilee?
It doesn't. It doesn't. We're ready for another nullification in October. We're ready for another nullification.
The nation is not ready, Honorable Tuju. They're tired. You're saying you're ready, but your citizens are not.
That's what leadership is all about. You have to be ready to take the pressure. And we are psychologically ready to take the pressure from NASA as long as they think that they can blackmail this country, each time threatening us that you do this or else. We're going to have demonstrations on Monday, we're going to have demonstrations the whole week. They started with twice a week, they went to 3 times a week, now it's a whole week. And they think that by doing that, we're going to say, oh, please, Mr. Former Prime Minister, can we please talk now? Forget it.
Okay. I'll take a quick comment from you, Irungu, and Honorable Amolo. We need to take a break, though, so I'll try and limit them. Irungu, I can start with you.
So I think for me personally, when I saw the 4-page advert from the IBC yesterday, which went through in great detail what were the responses that they had to the NASA demands, I was left a lot more confident that they had actually addressed many of the demands. And I think one of the things I would say to Otendi and colleagues and leaders within NASA is that to continue to say that nothing has happened, I think is not true. It is important to recognize that there have been some agreements and there's been some actions taken, for example, on greater ICT access. There's been some agreement on the use of standardized 34As. There may not have been agreement on changing procurement and the entire staffing within the IBC. And I think the IBC, in its independence, can make that determination. It is, of course, NASA's right to decide whether those are the grounds upon which it feels confident going to the elections. But I think that process has integrity. So the second thing I think for me is that we really do need to see a re-engagement of the IBC by NASA. And I think the NASA strategy at the moment really, it kind of flounders between 3 different strategies. The first is mass action or protests. The second is, litigation. And the third one is an outright boycott. And I think only one of those 3 options are politically and constitutionally pragmatic. So I think NASA needs to come forward and determine what is it that gives it enough leverage and is in the interest of the country. And those 2 things at the moment may not be together. So if I can speak in terms of what NASA could take on in the next 10 days, I think for me those would be the areas. But I think inevitably we will come back to this is not a constitutional crisis, it's not a legal crisis, it's a political crisis. And an inclusive dialogue at the highest level will give us the opportunity to create the conditions by which a legal framework can be found.
Okay, Honorable Molo.
Listening to the members of parliament who spoke from Nyeri and listening to my former MP, who I now represent, but whose views I do not represent or ascribe to, you see a bellicose attitude, a simplistic attitude, a very unfortunate attitude, that it does not matter what you say or do. Because we have the instruments of power, we will go ahead. How can a responsible leader like Tuju say that it does not matter what IBC does or whether we go for credible elections, because even if the Supreme Court nullifies it, we are prepared for yet another round? What is easier, to go for another shambolic elections with 14 billion down the drain, or to adopt the proper interpretation by the Supreme Court in 2013 and have the 90-day period and prepare for meaningful and credible election? What is easier? The only reason why Jubilee is joining IBC on the 26th is because they know that as long as IBC is not properly prepared, it favors candidate Uhuru Kenyatta, and that's why they are shuttling towards it. They are urging IBC on towards yet another shambolic elections. When Honorable Tuju says we are prepared for stone throwing and all, I think it's quite unfortunate, because first of all, the demonstrations, and I have been part of the demonstration, and I will be going again
today.
On Friday, for example, we were tear gassed 9 times, and I was one of them. I never carry any stones. Why would you throw a tear gas inside the car of a member of parliament? Honorable Caleb Amisi's car was tear gassed right inside. Were there any stones in that car? We were tear gassed. We addressed the press at Capitol Hill. Right as we were going out of the gate, we were tear gassed. That was not even the CBD. We came round to the Kenya National Library, we were tear gassed. We were tear gassed 9 times, including on Gong Road. We were members of parliament, we were not carrying any stones. The attitude that Jubilee, I am telling you the truth. I didn't carry stones?
Honorable Tuju,
to ask that question is in itself offensive. Honorable Tuju here, who has sold his soul, is a man who should know in his own village, as we are speaking now, Mr. Otieno from Kiswaru was killed in Bondo. He was not carrying any stone. You have a police force that is directed by the Inspector General, urged by Matiang'i, and now supported by the President and his deputy to kill and maim Kenyans who are protesting. And then you say they must have been carrying stone. First of all, that stereotype is very unfortunate. It is clear that what is now happening is so targeted to the point of genocide. It is so clear that since we had the elections in August, in excess of 50 people, not even 33, not even 40, they're saying it's in excess of 50 people have been killed. 48 of them
are saying between 30 and
48 of, I can tell you, 48 of them are from one community. If that is not genocide, what is genocide? And Honorable Tuju is here saying it is okay, you can continue, we will kill you, we will have elections. We'll have,
in all fairness, he hasn't said
that's not what I've said.
Kill anyone.
That's what, well,
you finish, Honorable Molo, finish.
But
I've corrected him, Honorable Tuju.
I am now, to that I do not ascribe to him as a person, as the Secretary General of Jubilee, and the Jubilee team, that is the position they've adopted. If they were respecting the Constitution, why stifle lawful demonstrations? The job of the police should be, but once you are notified of demonstration, then you ask the person who have notified you and you say, which route will you take? Okay? So can we agree that you will keep to those routes? Then you station the police strategically to do 2 things: to protect the demonstrators and to protect any unlawful elements who might join the demonstrators to destroy property. But that's not what the police does. They prepare to maim, kill and harm the demonstrators. How can that be lawful? How can that be defended?
Am I allowed to say something?
You're allowed to say something even as you answer my question. We're receiving some breaking news now that NASA have gone to court to challenge electoral laws that were passed last week by Parliament. We know that those laws are before the President right now. He's supposed to sign them into law. I'd like to get your response even as you, to that breaking news, which is actually on our screen right now, even as you respond to Honorable Amolo. Start with this one. It's more direct, then you can take time to...
Well, I think for NASA to go to court to challenge the laws, I think that's within the Constitution. We're a country which we should uphold the Constitution. If they feel strongly that the laws are inappropriate, then they should go to court. I think I respect that. So I have no problem.
Oh, you have no problem. Okay.
They should go to court. By the same token, if they are not happy with the rulings which are made by the Supreme Court in terms of IBC or in terms of even the Justice Mativo case, they should go to court. Because when Justice Mativo made his ruling, which has changed the scenario, that is a judge of the High Court. Just the way we respected, even if we disagreed with it, but we respected the judgment of Justice Maraga, they also have to respect the judgment of Justice Mativo. If they're not happy with it, I think this country's, our Constitution provides those avenues for complaints. What we will not accept, and I can say that without any risk of contradiction, is to be blackmailed by violence. And my brother Otiende has talked about some kind of ethnic profiling. And I think it is very unfortunate, because I want to tell you, you're not any more Luo than I am. I come from Marietta. And when I lost members of my family, you've been to their funerals. You're not any more Luo than I am.
Fair enough.
The question I should be asking, the question you should be asking, why is it that in this whole scenario, we are not even having a twig-waving protest in Kitui, in Vihiga?
Different people may choose to protest in different ways.
Precisely. No, you can say that. But we should be asking that question.
In studio, for example.
But we should be asking ourselves the question, why is that happening? That's why I must tell my constituents, or my brothers and sisters, who are your voters, that don't throw stones at policemen.
Fair enough. On that note, we need to take a break. Citizen Extra continues on the other side of this break. Many thanks for staying with us. I'll read your feedback as well. We will be right back.